Welcome to Nice Ashes. I'm Mike.
And I'm Nate, and we have a special guest from all the way in the United Kingdom. He goes by Gravey. His Instagram and other social handles are Grave Dodger. Say hello. We're happy to have you on.
Hello from the other side of the pond, as they say. And thanks for having me. This is actually my first podcast as a guest, so it's somewhat daunting and also something I've been really looking forward to. So thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, we've been looking forward to it as well. This is our first international guest, if you don't count Chicago International. A little bit of stateside humor. But yeah, our first full-on international guest, which is very exciting. And happy to have you here. And this cigar that we're smoking now for this episode is your pick. Do you want to tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, I primarily, because I'm based in the UK, we don't do a lot of New World cigars. We have obviously good access to Cuban cigars. We've never had an issue. And I've been very much a Cuban snob over the years because I've smoked cigars, since I was 15, and I'm somewhat older than that now. So I started off with Cubans, and the last couple of years I've been really trying to get into New World cigars, especially with social media content from the US, where you see a lot more New World cigars. So the one that I've gone for is Oscar Valladares, because he's done a lot of good cigars lately, and the Leaf by Oscar is one of my favorite cigars that's New World. So he's done another one, which is the Oscar, which is actually called the Oscar by Oscar Valdez, and it's the Maduro Robusto is what we're going for.
Well, we're excited about it. I don't think we've smoked any Oscar Valdez.
We have not. They are above the budget of the show.
You see, this is the difference between the UK and the US. Our budgets are quite different.
Yes.
Yeah, for the UK, this actually would be considered a budget cigar, considering what we normally pay for cigars.
Yes. So I think I spent $12 for these, which is, again, we talked about this before the show, but if you spend $12 in the US, you're guaranteed a good cigar, almost.
I think this cigar is quite interesting because it's in a tobacco leaf.
Yep. Yeah, it was wrapped at the end with the leaf.
Yes.
Which is nice presentation.
Very nice presentation.
This is something you do get with New World cigars more than Cuban cigars. You do get the theatrical side of the presentation, which I think is another thing that adds to the experience.
Yes, we're definitely suckers for presentation here on Nice Ashes. We do enjoy a good looking stick.
It's true. I like good presentation and I like a good gimmick, which is kind of a running theme of the show. I love gimmicks, and I like it when they're good gimmicks.
Yeah.
You should try the other Oscar Valdez, the actual leaf by Oscar, because it's an actual full tobacco leaf.
We're starting pairing ours with a single malt Scotch Isla Storm from the Highlands and Islands Scotch Whisky Co. in Glasgow. Since Gravey said he was a fan of Scotch and whiskies and other libations.
Indeed. I've actually gone for one of my favorites, which is the Balvenie. In honor of you guys, the American Oak is the one I've gone for this evening.
Oh, nice. First impressions, everyone. Have you smoked this one before, Gravey?
Nope, this is the first time for me. I've done the original Leaf by Oscar, but this is the first time I've done the Oscar by Oscar Valdez. Mainly because this has got the Candela leaf on the bottom half when you unwrap it. So I was curious to see how that would affect the profile.
Okay. Yep. Well, I'm liking it so far.
I like it a lot. It's peppery. It's definitely going to pair well with the whiskey.
It's got a lot of power to it.
Very dark. Very dark.
Yep. Which we like.
Yes.
It should go very well with the whiskey.
If this was a Churchill size, I think it would be potentially too strong by the end, for sure.
Yes. Well, and we're big fans of the Robusto size on the show, as we've mentioned previously. And what size do you normally smoke, Gravey?
I tend to do... It depends on the time of day I'm smoking. If I'm having a cigar with breakfast, it's a half Corona. So typically probably an H. Upmann half Corona, which is a nice little tiny Cuban. Robustos during the day, and then either something like a double Lancero or just a Churchill-sized cigar in the evening. I typically have about 3 cigars a day, to be honest.
Okay. That's a good pace.
Definitely more than us.
Oh, it depends. If we're recording multiple episodes a day, we'll do 2 or 3 cigars. And
Providing your cigars get stronger as the day goes on, you'll be okay. You can't go strong and then come weak because you just lose all the flavor.
That makes sense.
It does.
You'd be surprised, though, how many guys who smoke cigars don't understand that. It's like pairings with whiskies and stuff. You have to start off light. If you go for something that's literally barrel proof and then go for something that's just a basic blend, you're never going to taste the blend.
That makes a lot of sense. When we do our recordings, we usually do 2 episodes a night. And I always start us off with something weaker and then go to something stronger. So a Connecticut and then a Maduro or some variety of that.
That's the interesting thing, isn't it? There is such a, especially with New World cigars, I think there's such a range of different tobacco leaves and regions that everything's blended from. I think you have a lot more in terms of potential flavors that we don't tend to see with the Cuban cigars that primarily I end up with, if I'm honest.
Yeah, there definitely does seem to be a lot of variety in the wrapper and the filler and the binder, shade grown versus non-shade grown and
barber poles, and we have tri-barber poles.
Yeah.
We also have American-made cigars. We have Kentucky Cheroos and things like that. Anything you want, pretty much, you can get.
Yeah, we can even get Cubans now again, can't we? They lifted the embargo.
I haven't seen a legal Cuban in a store. I've smoked Cubans before, but they were from Canada.
You can, if you travel to Cuba as a US citizen, you can bring back $100 worth of Cuban cigars. You can't resell them inside the US. That's the last part of understanding I have from my friends who have been to Cuba.
What were you going to say about the barber pole?
The barber pole was one I tried about 3-4 years ago. And it was the one with the candela leaf. So it was the free stripe barber pole. I found that to be a very odd smoke for someone who's never had that sort of candela flavor before. But that's nice to see that sort of innovation now. I mean, obviously it's primarily hyped up during the public holiday you have over there for Ireland and stuff. So we don't tend to get them. We literally see them maybe once a year here.
Yeah, the first time I saw the barber pole or tri-barber pole was for St. Patrick's Day. A limited edition cigar. And since then, I've, of course, once you see something, you start seeing it everywhere. You notice it more. And I've seen I know Asylum 13 has a barber pole that's year-round, standard production. So I know they're definitely out there, at least here.
The Rocky Patel 10th anniversary Edge is a barber pole, which we're going to smoke later in the future. I got some 10th anniversary cigars for us. Well,
nice. So before we got started talking, I know we were talking a little bit before we hit record anyway on, kind of what we consider budget cigars versus what a budget cigar is in the UK. And I know that's something that you were very interested to talk about, Gravey.
Yeah, in terms of budget cigars in the UK, there'd be stuff like the Brick House, Connecticut. That would be considered a budget cigar, and that's around the £12 mark here. Whereas a budget Cuban cigar would be, I would say, probably £17 and up. But Cuban cigars in this country, we got stuff like the Cohiba BAK. That go, the 52, 54, 56. They're anything from £200 to £450 and up, depending on what you have. So they're not the budget cigars. That's the higher end cigars that we have here. So the range that we have here is quite extreme.
Yes.
But yes, ironically, the cigar we're having now today, this cigar in the UK is £17, and that's considered a budget cigar.
Okay.
How much does that translate for you guys?
Well, so this stick, what did we pay for this one, Mike?
We bought that cigar for $12.
Okay, $12 a piece.
It does make you realize the severe difference between...
Yeah, and we stated before we started recording that it's 1 pound is $1.29, I believe, the exchange rate currently.
1 pound is $1.29.
Yep.
As of time of recording.
Yeah, so it's about $13. It's pretty similar, the price that we spent. But for the Brick House, we can get a Brick House here for about $7 a Connecticut.
So that would translate to around £5.50 here in the UK, whereas we're paying around the £11 to £12 mark for that same cigar. So we're paying pretty much double what you're paying.
Yes.
Now I feel really hard done by.
Is that all tax and VAT and stuff, like the import? Value-added tax?
Yeah, almost, I would say 60%. So yeah, 60% of our market here is taxed, I would say. So just about almost 2/3.
Crazy.
But the cigar market here is nowhere near as big as what you guys have in the US. You have such a vast market. I think that's what helps keep your prices down so much, is because there is such variety. In the UK, we don't get any go with our cigars. So if we go and buy a box of cigars, that's all we get. Whereas in the US, you get given free humidors, lighters, bags, merchandise. We don't get any of that here.
We do like our America swag, goodie bags and assorted
yeah.
things.
So this is a good example. A few years ago, we used to have this deal, and you can still get the deal. And the deal right now is for $80, you can get a humidor that holds about 30 cigars and 10 cigars. And they're mid-range cigars, so they're each valued at about $10 a piece if you buy them individually. And it used to be $50 for that, but now it's $80. So for $80, you can get a glass-topped humidor that's sealed tight. It's a high-quality humidor, and 10 cigars that are all good.
Nope, we don't get anything like that here at all. Everything you get is separate. The only thing we have, which I would say is quite a nice advantage, although you can do this in the US anyway, is in the UK, if you want to go to a cigar lounge where you smoke inside, because obviously in the UK we have the smoking ban, you're not allowed to smoke in pubs or public buildings at all. It's called sampling. That's how they get around it. So you're not smoking, you're sampling. So it's a case of, if you want to buy a box of cigars, you have the right to sample said cigar before you offer to buy it. That's how they get around it in the UK.
Yep, that's how they get around it here, too. We've got, I don't know if it's fully nationwide, outside of casinos, which are on Native American reservations, by and large, in Minnesota here anyway. You can smoke in there, but otherwise you can't smoke indoors in bars or restaurants or anything. But we also have tobacco lounges where you can, due to the sampling loophole.
Yeah.
We also have private club exemptions. So if your lounge is a private club, you pay a nominal membership, then members of the club and their guests.
So you're a member of said
smoke.
club.
Yes. Yes. I lived in North Dakota, and that's how they did it.
Unfortunately, outside of London, we don't pretty much have that at all.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, in the UK, there's very few places we can do that.
Yeah, but there's no bobbies anywhere else, right? I mean, you should be good to break as many laws as you want outside of London.
You would think that, but there's always somebody willing to complain about it if you do. They just pop out of nowhere as well.
Oh, yes.
I think that's the thing as well with cigars. This is one of the things I find. It's one of those things, if it's a great way to unwind and relax, and the last thing you want is someone popping up and go, you can't do that here, which does happen quite a bit in this country. I was thinking, Billy Connolly did a sketch many years ago, the comedian, where he was actually visiting the US, and he was on tour, and he basically had a very stressful week, and he was literally sat in the I believe the reception of the hotel he was at, unpacked his cigar, unpacked his lighter. You know, the preparation we all do before we go the ritual of lighting our cigars.
Yes.
And just as he lit the cigar, how can I say this politely? A Karen walked up to him and went, "You can't do that here." And he was like, "But I was here first." It's not like I made secretly done this. You clearly saw what I was doing before you chose to sit down. You just chose to sit down after I lit my cigar. You could go away.
Yep. Well, it's weird because, vaping is so commonplace, but, the cigar is not as, I don't know if it's not.
Vaping is very much like the early days of cigarette smoking, where they're saying it's fine, it's so bad for you. I think they're going to find out it is quite bad for you. The thing that I put in with cigars, for example, is there's no chemicals. It is just the 5 tobacco leaves, generally, wrapped long fillet into a cigar, and that is all you're smoking. If you don't smoke it, it goes out. There's nothing there, no chemicals there to keep it going. There's no filter there that you're trying to smoke through. So it's, from that point of view, it is better for you. But obviously, it's like everything. In moderation, you're okay. I've smoked cigars for 35 years? I'm fine. I'm probably, at the moment, fitter than I have been in about 3 or 4 years because style changes, but I still smoke cigars because I unwind and relax and mental health a lot better because it makes me stop. Our lives are so busy. We're running around so much. It's important to take time to do things like that that do help us stop and unwind, I feel.
Yeah, lives definitely got busier and busier, especially with the advent of social media where you can always be doing something or comparing yourself to somebody, or, if I can't clean my house and do the laundry and do the dishes and mow the lawn on my day off, then I'm behind now and I feel bad.
Yes. Yeah, that's it, isn't it? It's very easy to lose sight of the small things. And it's the small things you, shall we say, comfort and help you relax and give you the strength to carry on being so busy. I mean, my whole thing for Thursday night smokes that I do was primarily because I was in London so much that I used to work Monday to Friday in Soho in London doing TV shows for network TV, ITV4, Channel 5, BBC, and so on. And then I used to work on Saturday nights doing football edits for the sport channels. And Thursday was my one night that I used to unwind, meet with friends in a cigar lounge. We would catch up on everything that's happened over the week. And that actually enabled me to keep pushing it so hard. But if I didn't have that little outlet, I don't think I would have been able to do it for as long as I did. But that's what brought the whole idea about Thursday Night Smokes, because it's that fun time I used to have and relaxing. And I think that's what especially as you say, with social media, we are all so hyper and comparing ourselves to everybody else that I think we need that way of just being able to step back and relax.
Exactly. It's kind of how our podcast started, as we
also
started
good whiskey
getting together and
really
smoking cigars. And you're liking the American whiskey?
Bourbons, I'm getting into bourbons, funny enough. I posted, funny enough, before we did this, a review on Woodford Reserve, which is one of the bourbons I haven't had for a very, very long time. And it's interesting how my tastes have changed over the last 5 years, because I actually quite liked it. And I really went into that one thinking, I'm not going to like this. I'm not going to like it. But it's nice to see things change. And having that, because primarily I do Scotch. I do normally cask strength, so 50% proof. Well, you call it 100 proof, it's 50% for us. So I always tend to go for that really strong kick of a whiskey, which is what goes so well with a cigar like this, which is a Maduro, which has a lot of flavour and a lot that it's got to fight against. So having that Woodford Reserve was actually quite pleasant. And it's like, I can see me getting into American whiskies a lot more now.
It's always good when you have your expectations exceeded. I know we've definitely, in the budget cigar realm.
Also, they're cheaper than the Scotch whiskies I tend to drink.
We've smoked some that we had almost zero expectations on, and we're very pleasantly surprised.
That's good. How are you guys finding the whiskey with the cigar you got at the moment?
I think it's great. I think it's a great pairing. We've got, I mentioned this, but I can hold it up. We're also on video, which will come out, I'm sure, later after the episode at some point. Ours is only 40% here, so it's not the full UK strength.
Yes. So in terms of whiskies, what's your favorite sort of whiskies that you do you tend to stick purely American, or do you go the rest of the world as well?
When I was doing a lot of whiskeys and scotches, I did a lot I did a lot of Speysides. So actually from, Ireland, Scotland. I've certainly done some Canadian stuff I'm not proud of. And and Mike can talk more. He's kind of the procurer of the naughty things like the cigars and the liquor.
And I'm the tech guy. The researcher and the buyer for what we smoke and drink.
Well, talk to him about the Whistler, because the Whistler is one that we quite like.
That is something I wanted to ask you about. So over here, Whistler, which is an Irish whiskey, is considered mid-range Irish whiskey, and it's pretty good for the style of whiskeys that we have here. Over there, have you heard of the Whistler, and is it any good, or would you consider it lower tier?
Actually, it's not one I've even heard of, and I've been to Ireland a few times. So it's interesting that a whiskey that you guys have gotten quite like, that it's not something that's even considered, it's even mentioned here. It's like, obviously you guys have heard of Johnny Walker, for example. So you got like Johnny Walker Black and all the red, the gold, the green, and the blue, and so on. It's probably the UK's biggest selling whiskey, and yet nobody in the UK really likes it, if that makes sense. So it's like a really good export, but not something the locals would drink.
Sure. Johnny Walker Red here is low grade, but Johnny Walker Black is that's a good mid-grade whiskey that people would drink. I like Johnny Walker Black, for example.
I do like Johnny Walker Blue, I will say that. The Black, I did a tasting, and they had of Johnny Walker Black that was from Bad. So it was the same as best the footballer used to drink. And seeing how that has changed in the 40 years between when he had it to when it is now, it makes you understand how blends are made and how they try, but never quite match what they originally had. So Johnny Walker Black from the 70s is truly outstanding. Johnny Walker Black now is all right, but I feel it's lacking. It is very much what we would consider an incredibly basic whiskey. It's what a lot of people would have with Coke. Dare I say that word? If you know what I mean. It's considered more of a mixer drink as opposed to an actual Scotch you have on its own, which is really bad when I think about it.
Johnny Walker Blue here is $225 a bottle.
How much?
$225
a bottle.
For a fifth, which is 750 milliliters.
And which one was that? Was that the black or the blue?
The blue. Black is $50 for 750 milliliters, which we call a fifth.
Oh, wow. Okay. Blue, you've actually got it over here than what you have it over there.
Well, that would make sense since it's produced over there, I suppose, right?
Yeah, I guess it does really when you think about it. I have to admit, I tend to go for a lot more single malts, essentially, rather than blends. Mainly because you get more of the cask strength whiskies with single malts. Blends are always around that 40% mark because they're just trying to hit their numbers. And is the flavour of the whiskey opposed to the making its numbers, which is why they charge you so much more for it. I think my favourite distillery is probably a distillery called Bruichladdich. And they have, the one I have the most is the one in the turquoise bottle, which is called Classic. That's 50% standard, but that's actually made up of 6 individual barrels to make their blend consistent. So that's the interesting thing as well. When you talk about whiskies, you always think of a single malt is one barrel, but it's not necessarily. It's just from one distillery. It's one set of barrels that they use, but it's one distillery only. So it's not from like Burnhaben wouldn't mix with Bruichladdich to make their bottle. It would only ever be just the Bruichladdich or the Burnhabens and so on. But it is interesting when you start going into how blend, it can be a lot of fun and it's one of those things that teaches you very quickly what you like and what you don't like.
I agree. I like small batch whiskey.
Have you guys done an Infinity Dram yet?
Never heard of that.
It sounds good. What is it?
So an Infinity Dram is basically, you got your whiskies that you like. Basically, what you want to do is get a nice decanter. The last shot of every bottle that you drink that you like, put the last shot in that decanter every time you try it. Unique blend of whiskies you like. And if by chance you don't like what you've done, the next shot that goes in completely changes it again.
That sounds fascinating.
So it's a great talking point at parties. But it does, I think the good thing about it is it does tell different blends works. So you can put bourbons in with scotch. The only thing I wouldn't do is put anything too heavily peated in it because the peat will overtake. So the smokiness would overtake the sweetness. So you'd have to be very careful about what peat whiskies go in. So something like Lagavulin would be too strong. Because that's very, what we call TCP, so it's got a very medicinal sort of flavour and smell to it. It would be very overpowering. But something sweet like Johnny Walker Black, Bushmills, which is an Irish whiskey.
I like the Bushmills and the Dewars.
Together if you start blending them. But it's a great way of talking and understanding what you like, where you'll change, when it changes. Bushmills is one whiskey to a lot of people. Because that's the thing with doing social media. I get asked a lot, what would you recommend as someone who tries first time who doesn't want to get overwhelmed? So something like that, an Irish whiskey, which is normally lovely and sweet, or a bourbon, again, which is sweet. They're where I would start. I wouldn't go with like Lefroy, for example. Lefroy is incredibly too far the other way.
Never heard it pronounced that way. But we're from Minnesota, so...
Yeah, we're from Minnesota and America, which doesn't pronounce things, and we cut out all the extra letters and stuff, so...
we have long O's here, so I've heard it called Lefrogue.
Can imagine quite a few things Get Lost in Translation would say and what you say.
Oh, yeah. I would give a suggestion for bourbon for listeners is Four Roses Small Batch. That's not a well whiskey here, but we always have it in a bottle in the house, for sure. That's my wife's favorite bourbon. So we keep it around. It's a good starting point.
That's one that I've been asked to try. That is one on my list. I've been asked to try that one by a lot of TikTok followers. They said, look, can you try the Four Roses small batch? You'll love it. I know it's not what you normally do, but give it a go. So now that you guys have recommended it as well, I'll get that on one of my next videos. It's always good to have a reason to buy another whiskey, really.
Well, and any reason is good enough, right? When it comes to whiskey, scotch, bourbon, I don't need much of a reason to try one.
Exactly. Indeed. I have to admit, I am very biased when it comes to whiskies because I'm quite lucky. Whiskey doesn't give me a hangover. Everything else kills me. If I drink beer, I suffer. If I drink vodka, I suffer. If I drink wine, I suffer. Whiskey, I can drink half a bottle of whiskey and get up great the next morning and like nothing happened. So that's why I very much tend to stay with the whiskies. That's always my excuse anyway. Find something that doesn't kill you.
I know if I drink gin, everyone around me tends to suffer, but I feel fine.
Oh, I did a gin tasting about 18 months ago. I could taste junipers for about 3. It was horrible. Get behind them.
Yeah, let me go out into the woods and suck on a pine tree, you know.
Yeah. So how are you guys finding the cigar now we're into the second third?
I like this one quite a bit.
I like it. It's dark. We haven't had a lot of flavor change, which is not a bad thing given how good it is.
I believe, the Cigar Aficionado rated this one about 97 out of 100 points. So it's actually one of their recommended go-to cigars. So that's the other reason I wanted to try it, because I really do like Oscar Valdez as a roller. And it's like New World cigar that's highly recommended, and Aficionado rated it quite that high. It was like, okay, there is probably something to that. And I have to admit, I've not been disappointed. I'm enjoying this one quite a lot.
Yeah, same. Have you ever tried, so you taught us about the Infinity Dram. Have you ever tried a tequila cigar?
Yes, I've done that Arnie trick where I've painted my cigar with tequila. It's a great thing to do with a cigar that you're not necessarily a fan of. I did it with Davidoff do a, what was it called? It was one of the little Davidoff cigars, and I did it with that because anything out of the cigar itself, but painting it was quite interesting. I did have to dry box it for about a day before I smoked it, though. But it is interesting to have that sort of spice that you get from the tequila, which was unusual.
Yeah, if you have the right kind of cigar to do it, it doesn't work with like flavored ones.
I think that worked better than it did when I tried the infusion with whiskey.
Oh, sure. But yeah, it's crazy how the tequila will make something that's maybe not at all flavorful, it will make it quite a bit more flavorful. Yeah, we've done it with some bin Maduros. Yeah,
I think it has to be more of a Connecticut wrapper. It's interesting how cigar culture, especially in the UK, we've got everything from what you, I suppose, suspect, like your bankers, for example. But you've got everybody all the way, your Joe Blogs, everybody comes together. There's almost no social barrier, if you know what I mean, between the two classes and cigars are involved. It's very interesting to be involved and see that dynamic. I've got a month, and the difference will literally have an office job to your real high flyer who's got more money than sense and probably should just be shot. But it's interesting to see how they mix, because they don't there's no one-upmanship with cigars, really. It's not like I'm having better cigar than you are. And I think that's something I really do like about the cigar culture in general. Although it is interesting when you think of how the brown cigars have changed. When I first started smoking cigars, people would take their band off almost straight away, mainly to show that they're not trying to rub their nose or somebody knows in what they're smoking. So if they're smoking that's really high end, they take the band off. So someone who can't...
Mike and I, he was saying we just switched from our Isla to, what is it, the Angler's...
Angel's Envy.
Oh, Angel's Envy. I thought it was a fishing scotch.
The backside of the bottle has angel's wings on it.
That makes more sense than Angler. I don't know why. I was thinking maybe all the boats and stuff driving up to Mike's we saw on the road. Anglers, you know.
It's the room. The room makes him think that we're at a fishing cabin.
Yeah, we're at a fishing lodge.
Yeah, at a lodge.
The Angels is quite a bit sweeter than the Isla.
Yes, this is a more traditional bourbon flavor for sure.
Bloody internet. I blame Elon Musk, really.
It's got to be
his
him.
bloody Starlink I'm using. Yeah, it's his Starlink I'm using.
Yeah.
So what do you guys edit this on? Do you use Premiere, or do you have a different editing software that you tend to use?
Yeah, so we typically do audio only, and I do that in Audacity. And if I do video, because I do video editing as well, typically not for the show, but I have switched from Premiere and Adobe's wonderful pay per every time you want to think about using Adobe model. Now I use DaVinci Resolve for my video editing.
DaVinci's not one I've ever got into. It's one I need to start using. I tend to use Avid. Because I work in the broadcast industry in the UK, we've always used Avid or Premiere.
And
so I tend to use
standard,
Avid for a lot of my stuff just because I've used it since the 90s. Yeah. But it's one of those weird things because it's the same software, but you get paid very differently depending on which software you're using.
Yes.
That's interesting.
But DaVinci is one I do need to start using.
Yeah, DaVinci is really robust, and the free version, the non-paid version, has pretty much almost everything you would need. I bought up, it's a one-time license that you pay as opposed to a subscription-based model, which is nice for me since I like to do, my main laptop is Linux, so I tend to not want to pay people to use things. But yeah, DaVinci, I quite like DaVinci, and the color correction is... very, very robust.
Yeah, that's one of the things. It's also quite a different way of editing on DaVinci to what you get with Premiere. Premiere's very close to Avid because they tried to copy Avid. Because I was lucky enough to be involved with the Football World Cup back in 2014, where Adobe came out with us, and we went through 18 versions of software in 30 days, because they would rewrite the software at night, so we could then reuse it in the next day to, basically, we were the guinea pigs. So that's where a lot of the software with Adobe changed in 2014, because we did basically the grunt work for them. But it's very similar to Avid in a lot of ways, because it was being used by broadcast editors. And it's like, well, we need this feature. Can we have it? Well, that's Avid. Yeah, but we use that all the time. Can we have it? So that's how Premiere's ended up the way it's ended up. Whereas DaVinci's gone off much more in a graphical interface, where you use trees a lot more to do your color grading and stuff.
It was only recently DaVinci added the nonlinear editing, because it was primarily a lighting, color correction, color grading software. And it was, last 6, 8, 10 years that they added in the video editing component.
Which is probably, if I'm honest, that's probably why I avoided it, because it wasn't primarily an editing software, it was grading. I kind of went, that's graphics side or color grading side, that's not me. But it's changed enough that it warrants the second look.
Yes, and I will say, and I'm not sponsored by DaVinci, so I'm not trying to sell you on something, but it's nice because when I fired up DaVinci Resolve the first time coming from Premiere, it asked me which editing software are you familiar with, and then it modeled the workspace window to put everything where I was used to finding things in Premiere.
That's actually a nice little trick, because I think that's one of the biggest things with using, especially nonlinear systems. They have their own idiosyncrasies of how they do things, and if you're very set in your ways of how they work, it stops you trying to learn a new bit of software. Whereas if that new bit of software says, oh, you've come from there, so you want to do it this way, that actually is a really big selling point for it. And especially, as you say, DaVinci Resolve is free. There's a free version of it that we can all use, and it is a very powerful grading tool, because primarily that's what it was used for. You think about the amount of feature films that go through DaVinci to be graded before we get to see them in the theatre. It's quite an impressive little lineup they've got.
Yep. Yes.
Sorry, that's me talking shop.
That's okay. Anytime I can get Mike to stop talking is... No, I'm just kidding.
If looks could kill, he would kill you right about now.
I'm a regular jibber jabber.
Yes. So it's good to have different interests.
It is, actually. But see, that's the other thing as well. The cigar community is so full of people with different points of view.
And I know nothing about any of this because I am in the electrical industry. So
you're what we call a Sparky then?
I used to be. I have a license.
That's dangerous.
Yeah.
Just touching my cigar up a little bit, actually. It's gone a little bit.
That term's used over here as well. By the way.
Yep, I did a little bit of touch up on mine as well, I don't know, a little bit ago on the cigar.
I have to admit, overall, I'm very impressed with this. Now I'm getting into my last third. It's been a nice journey. It's not a big story in terms of wild changes from one to another, but it's a nice, gentle story that's taken us along on basically like a good chat, essentially. It's definitely a cigar I'd recommend, I think.
Yeah, I like this one.
I would certainly recommend it.
Yes.
It's quite good.
And the presentation, like we talked about at the beginning.
It's got a great presentation. I like good packaging and a good gimmick. And it's got both, as far as I'm concerned.
And it tastes good, which is the more important thing.
Right.
That's true. It's one of those things, isn't it? I think the theatre, the presentation around the cigar, that's something you only get with New World cigars. You do not get that with other cigars at all. Cubans are way behind the curve on that one. They've relied purely on their image for so long, and I think New Worlds are very much going to overtake Cuban cigars very quickly if they don't watch out. God, there are so many of my friends that will laugh at me saying that because I am very much a Cuban snob.
Yeah, this side, we have so many limited edition one-off runs. You'd be hard-pressed not to find a cigar that you have never seen before in a good-sized humidor. And it's a wonderful thing to be involved with, like we are. You're never going to run out of things to smoke that you've never tried before.
Yeah.
It can be a bit overwhelming, though, sometimes if you're brand new to cigars.
Yeah, I think that's the other thing as well. There's a lot more people coming into cigars at the moment, especially in the UK, for example. They were saying from the age of 23 to 28, that's the market that's really growing in the UK at the moment in terms of cigars. And there isn't a great deal of innovation. I mean, we don't have the same sort of marketing around our cigars that you do in the US. So there isn't the packaging, there isn't the sort of offers that you get. And I think people here get very overwhelmed very quickly because it is very much the stiff upper lip and shirt and tie. And, well, I can't really tell you what you should smoke, really, because I'm not allowed to promote smoking. Whereas in the US, you guys are actually so much more laid back and try this one. If you like that one, you're going to love this one. We don't have that sort of advertising or marketing here at all. It is one of those things that unless you know someone who smokes cigars, you find it very hard to start smoking cigars because you just don't know where to start. On that note, thinking about it, what would you recommend to a new cigar smoker then? What would be your cigar that you would recommend? Right.
No doubt, CAO Moon Trance in the Robusto size. Number one. Okay.
Here in the UK, I would probably recommend would be a Cuban cigar, ironically, which would be the Hoyo de Monterrey number 2. That would probably be the one I would recommend in the UK, just because we've got easy access to it and it's a really light smoke, good ring gauge, good draw, and it's not going to leave you feeling, shall we say, you won't be overpowered by it. You won't feel sick or go green, which you do see quite a lot in the UK. It's a good one to start with. New World cigar in the UK is a difficult one. Probably a brick house, if I'm honest, because it's that light Connecticut wrapper. That would probably what I would recommend in the UK. Nate, what would you recommend?
For a starter cigar, we recently did the factory smokes. I really like the factory smoke sweet. It's a little sweeter. I've found with most people trying cigars for the first time, they're not ready for the kind of cigars that, Mike and I kind of gravitate towards, being the Maduros and the fuller bodied ones. Mike's recommendation of the Moon Trance is always a good one. It's nice, it's sweet, it tastes good, it's consistent. I gave my wife one of the factory smoke sweets. It's sweeter, it's not flavored, but it's it's a sweet smoke, easy. Yeah. It's not full bodied. Just something to get them enjoying a cigar, and then something that's not overly expensive. Like the factory smokes are cheap. The Moon Trances go on sale quite a bit, and they're cheap. They're cheap even not on sale. So get them something that they'll like, and then from there they can branch out, and we can say, hey, let's try, let's go down some Connecticut's, let's go down some Maduros, let's go down some other stuff, especially if they've never smoked a cigar before, because what I found is a lot of people are used to smoking like a cigarette, like they'll socially smoke a cigarette when they're drinking, and you inhale that, and you don't want to inhale a cigar. And so you want to give them something that tastes good enough that they don't try to inhale it, I guess, because you want to hold it in your mouth, the flavor, and it's kind of a little easier to, I think, to get them to do that if it's something that tastes good and not like a kick in the face or something. Not that any of these are a kick in the face to a cigar smoker, but for a newbie, a new person. Yeah,
I think that's it, isn't it? A lot of people who try cigars for the first time are either seasoned cigarette smokers, or they, as you say, they tend to do it when they get drunk at friends' parties or out at the bar. They'll have the odd cigarette. So when they try a cigar, because cigar smoke is so much thicker than cigarette smoke, if you do inhale it, you do, shall we say, it makes you feel a bit more, well, it basically makes you feel sick, essentially, because you're taking 6 times the dose of nicotine that you would normally from a cigar, because obviously you only absorb the nicotine off the cigar for your cheeks and your tongue. If you take it down as well, then you are getting a really big dose of nicotine, and that can make you feel sick quite quickly. It is quite fun to watch as a seasoned cigar smoker, though, when you watch someone else who's doing it for the first time, especially those who think they know what they're doing, who won't be told, then it can be quite amusing. That's very cruel on my part, but it is quite amusing. But again, as you were saying, it's like for example, the Maduro that we're currently smoking, that's quite a rich, peppery cigar. If you're not used to that sort of flavor profile, it's like having a very weak Irish whiskey at 40% to going straight into the barrel-proof Bruichladdich at 60%. You can't expect someone to have that 60% drink and enjoy it because they don't know what they're getting into yet. That takes a bit of time to get you there.
Yes.
In American beer culture, our standard beer is a light American lager, and it tastes very watery. So when people start to drink stronger beers, they'll start with a Guinness, and a lot of people in the United States think Guinness is very dark and very strong. But then we have beers all the way, what we call a Russian Imperial Stout, and that is thick, a thick, dark, strong-tasting beer. You don't want to start off with a Russian Imperial Stout, certainly.
Those are definitely the meal in a bottle.
Yes.
Exactly. it, isn't it? I mean, you think of Guinness and that sort of stuff. That was given to people as food during the Second World War. So it is. It's one of those. It's like, yeah, now we do that casually, but that was given as food back then because it was a good way to get iron and stuff into the body as well as everything else. Also, it keeps you nicely sedated because you got very light buzz off of it. So, what's your guys' theory or feeling about retrohaling your cigars? Because this is something that happens more. It's easier to do with an older cigar than a new cigar.
I'm sorry, what was, could you repeat the question?
What's your guys' feeling about retrohaling your cigar smoke? So, it's something I would tend to do more. Well, I do it anyway, but you would tend to do it with a vintage cigar. So, like something that's at least 10 years old, as opposed to a new cigar that's just been basically factory wrapped and out it's shipped. I tend to do it because you get a lot more of the flavor through your nose than you do through your tongue. So you get a lot more depth of flavor, essentially. It's like food, essentially, in that regard. But it is something quite difficult to do on a new cigar because there's a lot of ammonia still left in the cigar because it hasn't aged yet. Do you do that a lot or do you not do that at all?
I don't think I've ever done that. Have you, Mike?
Why don't you explain to the listeners what you are describing, and then I will. I think I know what you mean.
The process of doing,
but I've never heard that term before. I'll be honest with you, sir.
So, okay, that's no problem. What you do is basically, as you inhale your cigar, we inhale the cigar, we hold it in our mouths. You exhale through your nose, keep your mouth closed. So put it to the roof of your mouth and exhale. On a cigar like this, which is quite peppery, you're going to feel a bit of a burn in the back of your nose, but you should get a lot more of the flavor of that cigar. It's a trick that we use when we're gauging whether a cigar will age well or not.
Okay. Yeah, I've never done that.
I've done that with pipe tobacco. That's pretty standard practice, smoking pipe tobacco. But I don't think I've done it with a cigar.
Try it.
Another thing to try with our Infinity Crown.
I will burn your nose.
Should
it
we
is
try
definitely a good do
Mike?
because it gives you a bit more. It will open a little bit. I'll warn you because I've done it with this one.
Did you say you did it with this one or you haven't?
I have done it with this one. You get a lot more of a woody sort of cedar note off the back of the cigar with this one. If you do try it, very different dimension to the cigar. It will burn. I do warn you.
Yeah, that's interesting. It does burn. I can verify.
But if you do it with
now that you say that, I think I regularly do that.
Do you get any more flavors though? It's interesting because I get quite a bit more cedar note coming through and a lot more oak sort of back end. So it's not just the pepper that we get from the initial sort of hit.
Charred oak.
It is actually quite a lovely Maduro, I have to admit. But it's interesting because it's another element of the cigar that you wouldn't normally get.
I agree.
It'd be interesting to do it with cigars that you know well, if you know what I mean. Cigars that you know well and you enjoy. Try doing it with one of those. It'd be very interesting to see how your view of that cigar now changes. It's interesting as well. What's the oldest cigar you guys have smoked?
Mine was 35 years.
Okay. And when did you smoke it though? So just so I know what year the cigar was from.
I smoked that in 2006.
So a 70s cigar then. And was that Cuban or New World?
It was a Cuban cigar.
Right. Because you don't tend to hear a lot of New World cigars that are aged that long.
No, I recently smoked a cigar that I personally had in my humidor.
Really? That's impressive. Actually, none of mine last that long, I have to admit.
I have cigars from when I was 18 years old still. So I've maintained a humidor since I was 18. And I bought aged cigars at that time that I've kept. And I recently smoked a cigar that I had since I was 18, and it was aged since then. But I don't know how old it was, to be honest with you. I can guarantee you it was kept at the proper humidity for that time. But I smoked a cigar in 2006 that I know is 35 years old.
That's impressive, actually. That's good. How did you find it? I think cigars now are quite different to what they were back then.
We wouldn't know being Americans.
Well,
but I was a regular at a lounge, and somebody there had a collection of cigars that they got while they were in Vietnam, and they could get boxes while overseas. And this gentleman had a large humidor, and he stored several. And he was a Vietnam veteran that ran a veteran support group, and he gave me one because he was a nice guy.
That's the thing, isn't it? The cigar community that we're in, it's that whole experience of sharing it as a collective. It's like what we're doing now. We're three guys having a cigar, but it's the same cigar and we're getting quite different things from it. But I'm learning more from you guys than what I'm learning by me smoking it. And enjoying that experience as a result. It's enriching my experience. Whereas if I was just smoking it on my own, it'd be like, oh yeah, it's a lovely cigar, but I'm not to say that you guys. It's really nice to know.
Yeah,
The
likewise
oldest
for
cigar,
us. I mean, we're learning more about everything, really.
Okay. I think the oldest cigar I had was a Monte Cristo from 1973. So it was actually a year older than me. And that was very mellow, very floral, and I have to admit, quite an eye-opening experience, because all the pneumonia and all that was gone, and obviously it was being kept beautifully, but that was a gift. And a friend said, there you go, that's your birthday gift. It's like, thank you very much. But it's one of those things, it's like, wow, it's like wine in that regard. If it ages really well, it is such a joy to have and share with other people.
I consider cigar smoking a group activity. I don't smoke alone, typically. This room that you see us in is my Four Seasons porch, and this is a library/cigar lounge for us. And I invite people over, and we smoke cigars fairly routinely. I keep a fairly large humidor myself, so I have several cigars that are well over 20 years old now. Good luck for me picking them out of the group, but unless they're important.
Yes, that I understand totally. There are cigars that you're willing to share with people, and there are cigars that you're willing not to share with people. I think it's one of those things. It's lovely. It's that group experience I enjoy so much. It's like with whiskies. I love doing blind whiskey tastings, where we all pick a bottle, it gets poured by someone else, and then we all go through and go, well, actually, that's the best because of X, or this is a good one because of Y, and then you find out the one you brought was the worst one that you thought was the absolute pits of the group, because there's no preconception, because you don't know what you're trying. But because of the group experience, it's nice to have that sort of input from everybody else.
Yes, I recently had my nephew over for some cigars and board games, and he said that my house was like a brewery because he drank, I don't know how many different kinds of beer. We were splitting our servings between 4 glasses. So we drank quite a few varieties of beer. And it's very nice to do that. Yeah. I enjoy it more than anything else.
But do you find you get more out of the experience by what somebody else has said about what you're drinking as opposed to what you're drinking? Because you know it so well because it's something you enjoy. But someone else will bring up a note or a flavor that you go, actually, yeah, I didn't realize that was there. But now that you've said it, I can't not see it, if you know what I mean. And you learn more as a result of that, I think, which is what I love about this whole community we're in. It's the same with cigars. The notes that I pick out of this cigar are quite different to what you pick, mainly because what I tend to smoke is quite different on a day-to-day to what you guys smoke. My hardest thing with New World cigars until recently is, for me, they've always been very one-dimensional. So when a cigar starts, it tends to be that whole way through. It doesn't change too much. Whereas a Cuban cigar for me has always been third. So the first third is very distinctly different to the last third. Most New World cigars for me don't change that much. It might intensify, but it doesn't change, if you know what I mean. It's one of the reasons why I like the Oscar so much, is his cigars
I do. We make note of that.
You tend to go through that third change.
Please continue. I didn't mean to cut you off. We have a bad leg, obviously.
Yeah, it's fine. It is that. That's what I love about cigars, though. It is that journey of thirds. Everything's in threes, which ironically, I suppose, for me, is a byproduct of my TV life. Because everything you do in TV tends to be in threes. It's 3 different camera angles. It's 3 bits of dialogue before the shot change. It's those things. So with Cuban cigars especially, there's very distinct thirds in those cigars. The first third will be very different to the second third, and incredibly different to that final third. Very few, for me, until recently, New World cigars have been like that. The Oscar range does tend to go that way, which is probably why I've become quite a fan of Oscar Valdez, particularly. But I'm hoping that as I'm now getting more into New World cigars, I'm going to find other cigars that do that. For me, Brick House, for example, doesn't change. What it starts off as is exactly as it finishes, which is great if you're doing like gardening or going and playing golf. But if you're having that nice evening with your friends, you want that whole story to be there.
What are some of the ones that you did notice changes in that we've done?
The Rockdale Edge series of cigars. I'm a big supporter of Rocky Pill, The Edge. They are lovely cigars at a very good price. In the States, you can get one for $11, $12, and they're very high quality.
You see, I think that's the other thing as well. In the UK, we don't tend to get a lot of Rocky Patels. We get maybe 2 or 3 of his range, and that's it. So Rocky Patel's huge. His range of cigars is amazing, but we don't have access to that same range that you guys do, which I think is a great shame, to be honest.
I agree, but you hit it before. It's economy of scale, where North America has upwards of 500,000 cigar smokers between Mexico, the U.S., and Canada, whereas Britain and even Europe in general, lower population, and also we have more direct access. We have access to hand-rolled cigars if we wanted them. There's hand rollers in the southern United States and in Mexico that we can get very reasonably.
Yeah, see, we don't have access to that at all in the UK. I think primarily because we've never had the same restrictions in terms of our supply. As a result, it doesn't tend to be, it doesn't tend to be an issue. It was never an option for us. We don't tend to variety because we had the restrictions in our city with Cubans. There was never the innovation here. There was never the need to find that sort of cigars, essentially. That said, for example, France, they smoke more New World cigars than they do Cuban cigars. And yet Spain smokes more Cuban cigars than anywhere else in the world.
Interesting.
Yeah. I never thought of it that way. Having access to the Cubans would prevent innovation from others, cigar manufacturers. But it makes sense.
Yeah. It's one of those things you don't think about until you talk to somebody who has been on the other side of it. For example, you guys have that restriction, and to keep your market growing and improving, there's been so much more innovation. And I think that's where we on this side of the pond have missed out, essentially. And I do think that's a shame. I also think it is beginning to catch up, but we're a long way behind you guys in that regard. Changing the subject, if there's a cigar you could have, what would you go for? Any cigar in the world, what would you pick? It's a big question when you really think about it.
It is a big question. What about you, Mike? I feel like you have one in mind.
My ideal cigar would be a barber pole style cigar, and it would be a quad wrap with a filler, but you would change the leaves in the filler, and you would pick between Cuban, Nicaraguan, Dominican, and then you would wrap it with something oppositional. So some Brazilian leaf, maybe a green leaf and some Mexican leaf, and just blend it all these countries and all these styles, and put it all into one cigar. Probably a torpedo, something like a 58 ring gauge, something like that. Nothing too big, but something nice that you could have for an hour.
Okay. That's not a bad shout. Nate, what would you go for?
Oh, I feel so unknowledgeable in so much of this stuff. I was thinking I'd go for one of the real nice Plasencia cigars or something. I don't know. One of those ones that looks real nice. I like the octagonal Plasencia. That one was pretty good.
Is that the one with the green band? If memory serves, that has the green band on it,
yeah.
Isn't it?
Yep, and it's a octagonal or like a hex press or something like that.
That was, I think, the cigar that really got me interested in New World. Definitely the first cigar that got me very interested in New World cigars. Because that was.
But I like that one because it's got a lot of
there's
a lot of different flavor profiles.
There's a story to be told in isn't it? It's that it tells you as you're smoking it. A long good book or a feature film. That's you really your cigar. I mean, mine. In fact, mine would be the Monte Cristo 520. It was produced in 2012. It's a very limited run. That is still to this day my out-and-out favourite cigar. If I was on a desert island somewhere, that's the one I would smoke every day. But it's a Churchill-sized cigar, 58 ring gauge, memory serves. But it's just one of those things that you'd be very happy with for the rest of your life. It's that beautiful journey. Doesn't hog your time, but it just gives you that nice ride all the way through. And I think that's one of the beauties with cigars. New Worlds are beginning to get to that point, like La Plasencia. That cigar, that's in the UK. Well, Davidoff did that one, if memory serves. And Davidoff used to make a lot of Cuban cigars back in the 80s before they stopped making them and went into New World. But it's from a very good, shall we say, they've got a very good history and they know how to make their cigars.
Davidoff is very famous here as well, in the smoking community. Their pipes are extremely expensive, and their cigarettes are extremely expensive as well.
Yeah. So, just out of curiosity, do you guys smoke cigarettes as well as cigars, or do you just do the cigars? Mike, I know you were saying you did pipe tobacco.
I was a cigarette smoker. Yes, I was a cigarette smoker, and I quit for personal reasons. We can get into it off air, but I quit. I don't know, 15 years ago? No, not 15, maybe probably was 15 years ago. But I smoked pipes, and I still smoke pipes. My wife, she smokes pipes more than cigars. She will dabble in the cigars. But I press my own pipe tobacco and do all that sort of nonsense at home. And I have a collection. I'm a big pre-Republican Peterson P-lip pipe collector. And like I say, this is kind of our lounge area. So I enjoy the tobacco hobby, I guess you might say. But I don't smoke cigarettes anymore. I quit many, many years ago. But if I found a pack of Davidoff cigarettes, I'd buy it and put it in my humidor.
Right, Mike, you were saying that you're into your pipe tobacco, which is quite cool, I have to admit. I couldn't get on with pipes. It's weird. I love having the time to smoke a cigar. I don't have the patience to smoke a pipe. If you know what I mean.
The difference, this was explained to me when I started. I do. Please go, sir.
That's all right. I was going to say, the thing with smoking a pipe, you need that sort of patience and to be able to coax it along. I find I don't. It's like why, I think it's one of the reasons I like whiskey, for example. I don't do cocktails. I don't do mixes. I like my whiskey neat, just as it comes. Just give me the whiskey. I'm very happy. Don't give me ice even. I just want the whiskey. And I'm like that with my cigars. I just want the smoke. I just want to enjoy it. The pipe, you have to keep relighting it. You have to keep tamping it down and lighting it again. It's like, no, just can't do that. I don't have that discipline, shall we say.
It's about packing the pipe and having a good pipe in good condition. If you have a pipe that's in good condition and you pack it correctly, you never have to relight. You only tamp ever. And you do have to tamp, quite obviously.
But then it's like cigars, isn't it? If you don't keep smoking your cigar every minute, 2 minutes, after 3 or 4 minutes, the cigar will go out. So then you are relighting it. Although I have to admit, this one has burnt very well. I'm into maybe the last inch of the cigar now. And I have to admit, I've really enjoyed it.
I didn't have to relight until the very end. I put it down as we were getting closer to the end, so I let it go out, and then I relit. I didn't have any lighting issues. I thought it burned extremely evenly. My cigar was in the same humidor as Nate's this week for all of our listeners, which is atypical. So we are going to have a very similar experience with the burn. And I thought it was extremely high quality. I enjoyed it quite a bit.
Yep, I like this one. Very good, well-made cigar. Excellent flavor. Good smoke. Do you want to do final thoughts on the cigar, Gravey? And then we can end the episode and we can hang out and...
No problem. For me, I think the cigar's developed quite nicely. It started off with a lot of black pepper, which is what I was expecting from Maduro, if I'm honest. I wanted that sort of, I like a strong cigar. Now we've got down to that last sort of inch. I'm getting some sort of deep leather, a lot of oak, a bit of redwood almost, and it's just a lovely, almost like a warm hug sort of cigar. It's a great one to share with people. So this has been a lovely experience, guys. I have to admit, it's very honored to have been asked to do it. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for agreeing to come on, and thank you for the recommendation of this excellent cigar.
Yes, it's been one of the most memorable cigars I'm going to have of the year, at least of the year. So thank you for being on with us.
Pleasure's been all mine, guys. Thank you very much.
And thank you, listeners, for listening.
Be safe, have fun.